College students and graduates of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you ever witnessed in your dorm or residence hall? NSFW. One of my friend's girlfriends had a roommate that would masturbate almost every night, so it sounded like someone vigorously stirring macaroni. I remember this story every time I cook macaroni. Walked into the shared kitchen to make an Easy Mac. Upon entering, I see this drunk chick sitting on the edge of the table with a drunk dude standing in front of her. They were talking, but I was way too focused on getting my Easy Mac on, so I didn't think much of it. I put my Mac in the microwave and set it for 3.5 minutes before strolling back to my dorm. Ding! So I roll back to the kitchen to get my Mac, and sure enough, they're banging. Her skirt was pulled up, her pink thong was dangling from one of her ankles, and her legs were wrapped around his waist. Now, this guy wasn't thrusting like he is trying to start a fire down there, but based on the sounds this girl was making, he was giving her exactly what she wanted. I did what any sane man would do. I got my Mac, removed the lid, gave it a good stir, and checked for hard noodles. Once the quality control was finished, I casually walked down the hall to my friend's room and told him that someone destroyed all the furniture in the kitchen. He, of course, wanted to check it out for himself, so as he was walking to the kitchen, I got ready for a great reaction. As he gets to the door, he turns and looks in and says and does nothing. He just stares for a solid 15 seconds. I was starting to think they had stopped, then he gave the classic "what the F" shout and turns with an expression of confusion and satisfaction. And my work was done. To this day, that was the most satisfying Easy Mac I've ever had. Now kudos for this guy for a very well-written account of a funny experience. If this guy and girl went from talking to doing it in 3.5 minutes, it's a shame we didn't know what was said between them. I wonder if either one of them was like, "Quick, we only have minutes before the guy's macaroni is going to be done." Also, I'm starting to see a theme here with simple mac and cheese becoming kinky. Lived in a 21-floor tower, something like 1,600 students lived in it. Well, 4 guys decided to have a jam session in an elevator and go up and down the building. They had drums, a guitar, saxophone, and a vocalist. I think every single floor wanted to murder them. One guy peed on a cookie sheet and let it freeze outside in the winter. He took said frozen sheet of pee and slid it under another guy's door when he wasn't there. All the rooms in that dorm were carpeted. Well, I mean, this guy is an innovator. You can't really be mad about the ingenuity and progressive thinking, all for the sake of the prank. And this guy definitely got his money's worth at college. One of the freshman members of the football team used to just be naked all the time. He'd hang out in his room naked, and his roommate didn't like it, but of course, the football player didn't care. He would walk up and down the halls naked. He'd put on clothes for like dinner and stuff, but people hated walking into the bathroom to have him piss into the urinal while butt naked. The RAs talked to him about it, but he didn't comply. A guy I knew used to hook up with girls and then throw their clothes into the hall outside his room, then lock them out of his room, making them get dressed in the hall in front of whomever was around. I think he works for Comcast now, which fits. I wonder after this guy gets divorced for like the 3rd time if he starts realizing he's kind of an a-hole, and probably nobody likes him. Wait, who am I kidding? Who is gonna marry a guy 3 different times when they work at Comcast? I lived on the 9th floor of the dorms my freshman year. One wing was males and the other wing females. One of the girls on my floor received a giant 10-inch black dildo with a suction cup attachment as a gift gag from her friends for her 19th birthday. The guys on my floor thought it would be a great fun to periodically steal and then chase each other around with the said dildo and beat the living hell out of each other with it. I was in my neighbor's room one day when his dorm mate busted open the door and threw this thing full force at him. Fortunately, my friend was able to react quick enough to dodge out of the way, but unfortunately for us, though, the dildo went careening full bore into the window behind him, smashed through it, and proceeded to fall 9 stories. We watched in horror and shock as this dildo fell and hit a freshman girl on the head, who immediately collapsed and began convulsing. Cops and paramedics came and took me, my 2 neighbors, and the poor girl who owned the dildo down to the campus police station. They put us all into an interrogation room where we waited until the detective came in with the dildo in hand. He then proceeded to slam down the suction cup end of the dildo onto the middle of the interrogation table. We all lost our shit. We couldn't stop laughing due to the fact that this thing was slowly wobbling back and forth during the whole interrogation. And don't worry, the girl who got conked in the head with this thing was fine in the end. Now, I love this story primarily because it plays out like it's straight from a college comedy like Van Wilder or something like that, which means it probably is a little exaggerated, but hey, a good story is a good story. Also, what the actual hell is that made of? Last time I checked, those things aren't made of a material that breaks through glass. And by last time, I mean, I've never checked. Can a expert in the comments advise? A guy that was wasted and tripping balls went into the wrong room in the middle of the night and was thrown out of said room across the hall and through the wall into my old room. Turns out there had been a giant hole there that was already cheaply patched up years ago, otherwise there should have been no way he could have gone straight through the wall. It was a cold night, but my roommate and I pushed a dresser up to attempt to cover the hole until someone could fix it. Good times. Two things, same dude. We had a guy whose room was at the end of the hall, so it had a little extra space next to his door, a little alcove. We had tour groups come through our dorm with prospective students and their families. Well, on one of these days, he tore out a bunch of pics from his Playboys and posted them all over his door and on the walls outside of his room. He took 3 chairs from the common room and put them outside his room as well. He then had a sign that said, "The B***s and hoes waiting room." A mother went absolutely ballistic when she saw that. He got into deep trouble for it too. A few months later, when another tour group came through, our RA, Bill, who was a total was giving kind of a speech to the high schoolers and their families. So our buddy fell out of his room in just his boxers and his hands tied behind his back with a sock in his mouth. He spit the sock out and started yelling, "Bill, untie me, this isn't funny." The RA was humiliated and the parents went absolutely nuts over it. Our buddy was kicked out later that day. Now this is some epic shenanigans for sure. Hats off for this guy and his creativity and sense of humor. I'm curious if the parents going nuts means that they were pissed off and disgusted, because if I was a parent on that tour, I would probably be laughing my ass off too. My dorm had a secret Santa thing where your Santa would give you a task to do, and if you completed it, you'd get a gift. In a packed dining hall one night shortly before Christmas break, a huge, hairy, completely naked man jumps onto a table, tucks his junk between his legs, and screams, "Daddy only likes me when I'm a little girl." My roommate was his Santa, and as a reward for completing the task, she gave him a teddy bear wearing overalls. Pull up a chair, it's story time. Across the hall from me lived Ron and Todd. Not their real names, but who cares? They were not a good match. Ron was basically a fat hippie, and Todd was on the football team. The funny thing about it was Todd who drove Ron crazy, not the other way around. Todd basically didn't care about Ron's antics, but Ron couldn't stand sharing his dorm room with a straight edge. So after a few months, Ron cooks up a plan to get Todd out of the room. And this is how it goes down, based on Todd's story about what had actually happened. One night, in the middle of the night, Todd wakes up. The blinds in the room have been pulled open and it's light enough to see in the room. Ron is standing in the middle of the room, naked, painting a huge mural on the wall that has the door on it. As Ron moves from area to paint, he skips around and quietly sings to himself. Ron also paints himself. Little paint for the wall, little paint for Ron. After 5+ minutes of watching this scene from his bed with growing disbelief and horror, Todd says something and Ron turns slowly to face Todd, skips over to Todd's bed, kisses Todd full on the lips, and says, "Go back to sleep, Todd. You're dreaming." Todd is just sleepy enough to find this somewhat convincing, so he rolls over. Also, what is he gonna do, fight his naked, paint-covered roommate? So the next morning, Todd wakes up, and there's no mural anywhere in the room. No paint on the floor, no paint on any of Ron's bedclothes, and Ron is fast asleep in his bed wearing a t-shirt. So Todd wakes Ron up and asks if anything odd was going on in the room last night. Ron replies that he had a chem test that wiped him out, so he just came straight home and went to bed and had been asleep until Todd woke him up. So now, Todd doesn't know what the F to think. But the best answer appears to be that he had a homoerotic dream about his roommate being a painting satyr. So Todd nopes the out of the dorm room and gets reassigned. It made no sense to the rest of us either until much later when we were having a beer in Ron's room. He asked us if we wanted to see something cool, and sure we did. So he shut off all the lights and then turned on a lamp hidden near his bed with a blacklight. All of a sudden, a massive, glowing mural appeared on the wall with the door on it, and all over Ron's sheets and comforter. And Ron just started laughing his fool ass off. And that's how Ron got a room to himself. And the Oscar for Best Special Effects goes to Ron. What a hero of a man this guy is. Absolutely love this story, and it's specific and bizarre enough that I'm actually inclined to believe that it's exactly how it went down. It's a little creepy that Ron was able to come up with such an elaborate plan. Hey, but I guess it was extremely effective, and I'm sure he just had a blast with it along the way. And poor Todd still probably doesn't know what to think. I bet this actually haunts his real dreams now.